Welcome to Super 66 Samurai Sunday.
Hello everybody and welcome back once again to Samurai Sunday, and I am your host, Will Martell. And this week's episode, we will be reviewing this classic from, I believe, late 1979-80. It was a little while after the real Game of Death came out. But I'm not going to talk about that right now because I got my own opinions on the original Game of Death movie. So, we're going to be discussing today Enter the Game of Death, starring one of the Bruce Lee impersonators at that time, Bruce Lee. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to roll this clip and be right back with my thoughts.
Bleib stehen! Ist das schon? Lass sie los! Los, Jungs, macht diesen Bastard fertig! Los, weiter! Stehen bleiben! Bill macht diesen Kretin fertig!
Das Dokument!
You've just seen the clip for Enter the Game of Death. All right. Here's my opinion on Enter the Game of Death. If you're looking for a movie that basically just has no plot line, no substance, and nothing going for it, and you just want to watch a movie where there's unnecessary kicking and punching and people coming out of nowhere to fight somebody and stuff like that, this is the movie for you. All right. So, Enter the Game of Death did not have a plot twist really. That what they tried to do was mesh up Enter the Dragon, that was done by Warner Brothers, which was a high octane martial arts film, and then they tried to do the Game of Death, and then they tried to mesh the two together, and this would be the equivalent of a car crash. I mean, it was just so all over the place. I mean, the the line that my friends and I, usually just laugh our butts off at is the line where Bruce Lee is actually jogging. He's jogging in the woods, and all of a sudden these like 7 or 8 men come out of nowhere. They're Americans, and Bruce Lee stops and he's like, "What do you want?" And the other guy's like, "Mr. An," that was Bruce Lee's name in the movie, "Mr. An, we've been looking for you." And and Mr. An says, "What for?" And the guy says, "Well, we just want to see how good your kung fu is." Oh God. Anyway, this movie was so all over the place. I swear to God. I watched it for this review the other night, and I could not stop laughing. It was so hilarious. So here's my thoughts on Into the Game of Death. I definitely give it 1 thumbs up. Now, why do I give it 1 thumbs up? Because first off, back in the post Bruce Lee era, and I totally understand it because I just seen an interview with Bruce Lee, who was one of the top Bruce Lee imitators. I think he was number 1, in the world as far as Bruce Lee, imitation movies. His movies seen stateside before anybody else's. So Bruce Lee in an interview said that he told a director, he said that please don't make me make another one of these lousy movies. So even Bruce Lee had an idea that these movies were terrible. Okay. But, there were a bunch of imitators at that time. There was Bruce Lee, Dragon Lee, Conan Lee, and the list goes on. Oh, yeah, I think I said Bronson Lee already. I mean, that was my favorite, Bronson Lee. Anyhow, but, Bruce left a big void in the industry, and they were just like scrounging around for whoever they can get to try and bring that magic back that Bruce had. But unfortunately, these movies didn't stay around. They didn't stay around for long because people were looking for new action stars. Jackie was the one that, that put Hong Kong back on the map because Jackie had something different. Jackie wanted to do kung fu comedy. Everything was so serious. Bruce was the tough guy. He was like the Steve McQueen of the martial arts world, where he was a tough guy. He was a guy that didn't take crap off of anybody and, would kill you, if he had to. But Jackie wanted to bring something lighthearted. He wanted kung fu comedy where he could hurt somebody, but it would be comical. So Jackie's whole plan was to basically do something different that, than Bruce was doing at that time and didn't want to imitate him, which I totally understand it because he knew that would have been a career killer. So Jackie was very smart about that stuff. Okay, so Bruce Lee, who had at that time made a career off of starring in anything Bruce Lee at that particular period, was he was maybe number 2 or 3 in the world as far as Bruce Lee imitators. I think the number 2 guy might have been Dragon Lee. The number 1 guy was Bruce Lee or Lai Xiaolong. But I would say that if you want to laugh, watch this movie. If you don't want to get a laugh in or anything, and you just basically want to be, want to find another movie with a storyline. This is not the movie that you should be watching because there is no storyline. There's a bunch of quirky dialogue, and whatnot. And here's a side note. This movie also stars the legendary Bolo Young. Okay, no, I know a bunch of people out there got their mouths open, but yes, Bolo Young is in this movie. Here's another side note. The legendary Steve James is in this movie. Okay, now this was hard to believe until I had went just out of curiosity to run down some of run down Steve James's his resume, so of how many movies that he had done before he had died of cancer in 1991. Okay, or 92. But I digress. Anyhow, I went to look up his filmography and that movie came up, so I had to go back and watch this for the review. Yeah, lo and behold, Steve James is in this movie, Enter the Game of Death. Yes, I know a bunch of you got your mouths open out there, but yes, I'm talking about the same Steve James that made the American Ninja movies famous. Okay? Yes, that guy. All right? He was also Kung Fu Joe in I'ma Get You Sucker. He was also starring along Chuck Norris in I think about 2 or 3 films, but 2 that come to mind is The Hero and the Terror and Delta Force are 2 that come to mind. So Steve James had come a long way since Enter the Game of Death at that time. So my overall rating on Enter the Game of Death, it is going to be 1 thumbs up because of the fact that this movie's mashup, it was all over the place. I mean, I had a lady friend that was over and she tried to watch it. She hates Kung Fu movies, period. And with this one, I kind of don't blame her because it was just everything was all over the place. Couldn't keep up with the storyline. I mean, and yes, the dubbing was bad. And, if you want to go for wall to wall, just kicking and punching with no rhyme or reason, this is the movie to watch. And if you want to see somebody that, is a Bruce Lee, imitator, and you could tell the guy was wearing a wig, now that I look back at it, I looked at the movie closely, and Bruce Lee actually had a wig on. No joke. Okay. So anyhow, I give Enter the Game of Death 1 thumbs up, but I gotta say that if you want to laugh, you will laugh your butt off at this movie because I did. I really did. And next week, I will be reviewing the Kung Fu classic, Dragon versus Needles of Death, right here on Samurai Sunday. But until then, keep kicking and always keep punching. See you soon.